What's the trashiest wedding you've ever been to? My friend group and I talk about this wedding to this day, and probably will for the rest of our lives. The bride and groom decided to do things on a very, very small budget. And that's fine. Frugal weddings and budget weddings can be beautiful and nice. There is a difference, however, between a frugal wedding and a cheap wedding, and this was cheap. For instance, the wedding was in July. They decided to hold it in a non-air conditioned park shelter. The decorations were actual trash. The bride decided me and the other bridesmaids needed tiny top hats, and she made these from discarded styrofoam cups. Mine had ants in it. She asked me to be the maid of honor. I was flattered but confused. She'd had 3 maid of honors before me, and they all quit for various reasons, mostly baby daddy drama related, and she wanted live music but wouldn't pay a pianist. My friend, Steven's sister, said she'd play the wedding march on a keyboard for $50. Said sister couldn't actually play the piano, but she did the pre-recorded wedding march song. Nobody could tell the difference because the woman in charge of baking the cake got crap-faced the day before and was baking the cake in the non-air-conditioned park shelter's little kitchen while listening to the radio, very loudly. The bride and groom tried to write their own vows, but got in a fight over it and didn't tell the officiant until the day of that there were no vows. Fortunately, he was on it and had backup vows ready to go. The bride hadn't even tried on her dress, which she'd bought from AliExpress, until the day of. It was way too small, and we had to rip out the back and a safety pin and some satiny white fabric, which would have been great if the dress hadn't been off-white. The groom made comments about it, and it turned out that the whole dress thing was based on his mom offering to pay for the dress, then rescinding because she had to bail out his brother. My friend, instead of going to an actual store and buying a dress, picked one off AliExpress. Now, this would have been less weird if I hadn't been dress shopping with her like 3 times because her mom couldn't or wouldn't pick out a mother of the bride dress. The groom's entire family, including his best man and his 2 groomsmen, left right after the meal. Spaghetti, green beans, and a McDonald's orange drink was served. The DJ, my friend Steven and his Bose speakers, didn't know this and tried to announce the groom's dance with his mom. Well, his mom had left. Apparently, his family was furious that it was a dry venue. The only member of the family left was the ring bearer, who it turns out was forgotten. So we had to take him home because his family wouldn't even come back to get him. The groom slept through the rehearsal and showed up to the wedding drunk. We had to put another friend on bouncer duty because 2 of the bride's aunts tried to walk away with the cash envelope. We gave them the envelope because he was the tallest and we figured he could outrun the ants. The bride's brother was originally on envelope duty, but we caught him taking a 50 out of it, so we had to take it from him. We had to politely inform the best man that he couldn't smoke in the porta-john. We had a porta-john, also, instead of actual working bathrooms. The worst, though, was the photographer. As maid of honor, I was informed day of that I had to keep the photographer 100 feet away from the ring bearer and flower girls at all times. He was a registered offender, but also the bride's uncle, and he volunteered to do the pictures for free, so... Well, he ended up using a telephoto lens because he couldn't get close enough to the actual wedding to take the pictures. Also, to make things even better, they divorced a couple of months later after the house they were staying in burned to the ground. I have no idea to this day why they even got married. This is like a Murphy's Law of attending a wedding, being at a wedding, having a wedding. Yikes! Next story. Wedding was in a suburban driveway. The maid of honor stole the bouquet from someone's garden, and the best man proudly announced that he had shoplifted the rings. The groom wore a button-down shirt that said, "F off," in very fancy lettering. The bride stopped in the middle of the vows to tell her mother to get that effing kid out of here. It was her second kid from the previous bloke. When it was all over, we apologized to the celebrant, and he'd said, "I'd seen worse." Next story. A wedding on the beach behind Hooters. The officiant stood next to a trash bin. As if it was planned, the trash collector pulled up during the vows. Did he wait to change the bag? Well, absolutely not. Children at the wedding swarmed the couple like the flies around the trash can just after the kiss, stepping all over her dress. She bent over to adjust her sandal, and a pack of Marlboro Reds fell out of the bust along with her right breast. It felt like we were rubbernecking instead of witnessing a marriage. Next story. I was actually the bartender, but it was a hoot. First, wedding was outside. and it stormed violently. Groom was hammered pre-wedding, hit on all the bartenders, then the DJ got hammered, made some lewd comments to women in the microphone. Then basically everyone was hammered, knocked over the wedding cake, which also happened to be on a table with many candles, so the place caught on fire. In the rain. Good times. I often wonder, though, how that marriage worked out. Next story. A bride made a speech thanking her in-laws for financial assistance for the event. Her mother was not thanked, and she was furious. There was a long head table for bridal party and parents. It was made out of small tables pushed together by one long tablecloth. The mother pulled a small table out of the arrangement, catching the tablecloth and nearly destroying the head table setup. Now the bride got angry, and there was much back and forth with various family members attempting to make some peace. The mother refused to push back her table and began to invite others to sit with her, all people who were not meant to be seated at the front. Mother of bride continued to sit there and talk crap about her own daughter, the bride, to anyone who would listen. Next story. Oh boy, this is my time to shine. So my uncle was a preacher, right, but also owned a restaurant. A 16-year-old got married to her 17-year-old boyfriend in the back room. Her name was Candy. After the ceremony, she opened her wedding gifts like it was her birthday. One of the waitresses, Brenda, had given her old lingerie as a gift. I remember during the reception, Candy went out back to throw the lingerie into a dumpster while Brenda sang, "These boots were made for walking," on karaoke. Now, for their honeymoon, her mom bought them a room at the Holiday Inn around the corner. But they got bored, so they just came right back home. Next story. Ceremony was in a park. Not booked or decorated, we just showed up and found a spot. The reception was at a scout hall. No decorations again, and for catering, the bride's family went through Red Rooster Drive-thru and got a whole bunch of chickens and chips. Like 5 different cars went through one after the other and ordered. They didn't even pre-order. Groom and all his friends were high as a kite, and only reason bride wasn't is because she announced that she was knocked up. Groom and his mates bought their dirt bikes and after eating went out and rode them around in the hall. It was all so loud and so muddy. Next story. Both of my middle sister's weddings. Now don't get me wrong, she's the sane one of my sisters, and I actually really love her. But she has, shall we say, a unique sense of style. Wedding number 1. While she was working as a carny and was held after closing time on the midway at some Podunk County fair. I may well have been the only sober person there, and there were definitely more tattoos than teeth in attendance. She wound up leaving him when he turned out to be an abusive, self-centered twat who contributed nothing to taking care of their kid. Wedding number 2. This was just last year, but mostly okay, and brother-in-law is really a stand-up guy. But y'all, the whole wedding theme was freaking camo. My sister wore a camouflage wedding dress and matching Crocs. Brother-in-law wore jeans and a dress shirt with a camo vest. The friggin' cake was covered in camo-patterned ribbons, and I don't know where the heck she got camo-patterned silk roses, but the cake had a pile of those too. Hot dog. That's the kind of wedding you need to see to believe. However, they're all in camo, so good luck with that. Next story. Probably my dad's second marriage. Along the banks of a river with trailer homes in the background. He's wearing a Tuxedo t-shirt and rainbow mirror sunglasses. The ceremony took place at noon. Well, he'd been drinking since 5 a.m. I had to walk one of the bridesmaids down a flight of steps as she was legally blind, and someone asked me if I was going to bang with her. I don't know if 5 o'clock somewhere meant a.m., but hey, it doesn't say they broke up. Might have been a good omen. Next story. There were no tables, no chairs, like nothing. They had an open bar, but no effing chairs. Everyone had to put their drink on the ground and hold their plate to eat. It was freaking crazy. Everyone just assumed that some sort of terrible thing happened where the tables and chairs people didn't bring them. But afterwards, I asked her, the bride, what happened, and she just said, "Oh, we would have had to pay extra for those." Next story. At my aunt's wedding with her new husband, I got drugged by one of her stepsons and almost got assaulted. Quickly, one of my real cousins noticed I was gone and for a long time looked for me. He's the only one in the family who knew about my anxiety, so he was worried about that. Caught the guy taking my shirt off by the kitchen counter while I was half unconscious. He called the police, and then I was taken home very safely. Next story. A friend of the family is a wedding photographer. We went to dinner with her family a few weeks ago and she explained the most bizarre wedding she had ever been to, which happened to be that same day and involved someone that we all know. Wedding was behind a trailer in a trailer park. Folding chairs clearly labeled property of school, and there were 2 church pews and several 5-gallon buckets turned upside down. Some of the wedding party arrived on riding mowers. The bride was wearing some screen-printed t-shirt, jeans, and a veil made from cheesecloth. The groom was wearing a jean vest with no shirt underneath and some torn jeans. The bride had met the groom just over 3 months prior, as the groom was still married to his first wife at the time. Well, divorce takes 90 days here, so do the math. Most of the guests were dressed like they were in the middle of doing yard work. Reception was in the same area. Several cases of PBR and Miller Lite, supermarket pre-boxed cheese, and some deluxe cracker spreads, and a few Bojangles fried chicken boxes. Next story. I don't even know where to begin. Ceremony was comprised of immediate family, then followed by a reception with all guests in a relatively nice hotel banquet hall. An hour in, at 7 p.m., the open bar was completely closed down because multiple guests were throwing up in the bathroom sinks, causing flooding. The groom was so wasted even before the ceremony, but was blackout by the time of reception. During the first dance, he kept his hands in his cargo pant khakis the entire time and ate dinner sitting on the floor in a corner of the hall while the bride sat at the head table alone. About 2 hours in, the groom just randomly left and slept at their house while the bride stayed in the newlywed suite by herself. They are now separated, as you may have assumed by this point. Next story. 2 friends from college wedding. It was just awkward. Bride sewed her own dress, which was a size too big. She's really slim and tiny, so she looked like she had a very conservative satin nightgown on that was a rush job. Their first kiss was at the altar. When they finished, the pastor said, come on, you can do better than that." During part of the ceremony, there were parents' blessings. Groom's family was quick, it was private, really sweet. Bride's parents were loud, they bawled, and they went on for about 15 minutes each. The reception was all potluck, and not enough food for those attending. Wedding colors were baby blue and lavender. A mutual friend was the DJ, and the mother of the bride passed him a note to read, aloud to the guests. Poor guy then had to go, groom, your mother-in-law says you can pet the kitties now." The previous spring break, mother-in-law had gotten bride a baggy, standard-sized t-shirt with kittens on it. Kittens just so happened to be about bust height. I offered to do flowers, boutonnieres, corsages, centerpieces, the whole thing, but the wedding party didn't store them as I had suggested, so the next day they were just all wilted and really sad. Did I mention this was also a dry wedding? Next story. It was in the middle of absolutely effing nowhere. It was a 5 p.m. wedding, and there was no food served, and we couldn't just run out and get McDonald's or something because there was nothing around. We had to help set up tables. We had to fill out our own thank you cards. They even had an example for us to follow. Dear blank, thank you for the blank. We'll use it to blank. Then they asked us to help take down the tables as well, so I refused to help and got the F out of there. Oh, also no cake. Next story. I was staying at a massive, really truly massive hotel about a decade ago, and a group of what I can only describe as rough-looking hippies were having a wedding reception in the ballroom. I was sitting at the bar ready to order when one of the groomsmen invited me to eat and drink. They apparently had too much food and alcohol. Of course, I obliged. Free alcohol and food, why not? When I walked in the ballroom, all I could smell was body odor mixed with a hint of food. It was so dang hot in that room. Some of them weren't wearing shirts, male and female alike, and almost none of them had shoes on. Only a handful of people were dressed somewhat casually. It was just humid and sweaty and warm in there. So when I say rough-looking hippies, just picture that stereotype in your head, and I crap you not, that's how most of them looked. Instead of a DJ, they had a dude on the stage with drums, bongos, a guitar, a rain stick, and I'm pretty sure a digeridoo. I didn't want to be rude, so all I grabbed was grilled asparagus, and then I left as soon as the guy walked out of sight. It was so disgusting in there. The next morning, I noticed they had cordoned off the ballroom area, and they had a good portion of their housekeeping staff stacking trash bags into those rolling garbage bins. I felt so bad for them. Next story. I went to a wedding that had a Matrix theme. The groomsmen all wore floor-length leather jackets and tiny sunglasses. The MC made a slideshow of images from the movie with the groomsmen faces badly photoshopped on. They insisted on calling each other Neo and Morpheus while high-fiving each other. It was so painful. There was a lot of tension at the wedding, and it turned out that the groom had cheated on the bride a few weeks earlier, but she had still decided to marry him. His family was really trashy and took the view that their son had cheated because the bride clearly wasn't good enough for him. The bride's family was not trashy, but upset that she took him back and obviously hated the groom and his crappy family. The sister was the maid of honor, and her speech was very sarcastic. "I'm just so glad to welcome you to the family, Greg." But it went over the head of the groom's relatives, and everyone who knew the story was cringing. The groom's dad was loaded. He stood up and told a long and convoluted story about a wife giving teaspoons of sugar to God, which made no sense and seemed to have a very sexist undertone. They cut quickly to the music, and the drunk groom's father hit the dance floor and started grinding with some woman who wasn't his wife. His wife sees, has a crap fit, and starts screaming at him. Now they won't stop fighting, so they cut the music and have the four-piece high school band play classical music very badly. This includes a squeaky clarinet. Like a terrible foreshadowing from above, it starts peeing rain and people start trying to politely leave. Last thing I see is the groomsmen running to their cars with their trench coats folded up over their heads to protect their tiny sunglasses, while the band plays the squeaky Matrix theme song. It was amazing. I forgot to mention that they were all cops and it was in New Zealand, so you can reread it and imagine Kiwi accents. "Right, high five, Morpheus." Next story. Really old friend of my wife's. She hadn't seen her in years but was invited to her wedding. The guy this chick was marrying was absolute "I studied the blade" levels of cringe. He was shirtless, wore black jeans, and his arms were covered in barbed wire tattoos and quotes that you'd find on those stupid, idiotic, sweet, tough skeleton memes where they point guns at you and claim they'll F you up if you hurt anyone I care about. Kind of crap. It was quickly apparent my wife and I were the only ones in attendance that didn't live in a trailer park and practiced some normal human hygiene. They were roasting what I thought was a suckling pig on a spit, but as it cooked, I noticed crap bubbling out of its butt and its stomach was swelling. I asked his best man if this was a properly slaughtered pig, and the best man proceeds to regale me with the tale of how he and the groom got crap-faced the night before, climbed into a nearby farm and stole this pig. They shot it in the head and impaled it with a long piece of rebar, which upon closer inspection was what it was turning on. Just so happens, while we were discussing the groom's recent crime, the pig's stomach exploded. Blood, crap, guts, it all poured out in enough quantities to put out the fire. Wife and I had already given each other the "yeah, it's time for us to get the F out of Dodge" look before this. But yeah, needless to say, we beelined for the car and left. We later found out the cops showed up and arrested the groom and his best man once the farmer they stole from realized one of his prized pigs was missing. The groom tried to fight the cops, got tased. He made it easy for them as he was already shirtless. Next story. Probably going to get buried, but I went to a fancy wedding at a beautiful venue. It was an incredible outdoor ceremony with the reception inside a super fancy lakefront venue. All went well until the bride's dad stood up to give a toast. The bride's dad and her mother had been divorced since she was little, so at least 25, 26 years they've been divorced. The bride's side of the family is very well off. With about 200 people in attendance, he essentially roasted the bride's mother for 10 to 15. He was talking about how she used to F the tennis instructor he paid for. Then he went down the list, naming the guys she dated after him, how she couldn't hold a job and just used his money. The mom had her current husband there, and then he turned his attention to that guy and was roasting on him for being the flavor of the week and how he won't be around when his daughter is back from her honeymoon. He then moved back onto the mother and really laid into her again. I mean, he was off the rails. It was like a Comedy Central roast of the bride's mom, but fueled by his apparent hatred for her. I had been drinking a lot, so at first I thought I was mishearing things. But the longer it went on, I was sure that I wasn't. I have no idea how no one stopped this, but they literally let him go on until he was done, uninterrupted. He did not mention his daughter or the groom once. He just effing roasted his ex-wife the whole time. Next story. Waitress at a bogan wedding. The night ended with the chef and I rounding up the kids and barricading us all in the kitchen and locking the doors to prevent the melee of fighting adults outside from A, accessing more weapons, some of them brought their own knives, and B, hunting the kids. They ranged in age from toddlers to preteens. It was just the chef and I, two women and a whole bunch of screaming and frightened kids until the police came and carted everyone off to jail. Wedding photographer showed up the next morning for the scheduled photo shoot. I had to tell him he could find the wedding party at the local jail. Now the chef and I are still friends, but we both quit that place shortly after that epic wedding. Next story. They met and married within months. He was 40s. She was upper 20s or low 30s. I was shocked she was getting married, shocked this was the guy, and shocked that I was invited. Kind of felt like I had to go. He had like 3 preteens that did whatever they wanted and lived in the backwoods. Wedding was at his cabin or property, potluck style. Wedding was just them standing in the yard. No seating, no grouping of friends or families or sides of an aisle. Just hang out, watch them do their thing. No photographer. When they kissed, everyone pulled out guns and shot them off. I hadn't noticed the guns or seen that anyone was carrying, so that was a bit of a shock. Then the happy couple rode off in an ATV into the woods for a victory lap. They came back, we all ate swamp people food, and everyone was sloshed. I left early with a friend, and on the drive home we were like, what the F was that? And they obviously divorced shortly after. Next story. Okay, so I've got one. Alright, so the bride was my older cousin. We were all from the Midwest, but she's been living off with her family in a small town in the Southeast. Approximately 20 to 30 family members flew and drove in from out of state, halfway across the country. This was going to be her first marriage, to a man that was not the father of any of her current 4 children, each from different fathers. This was the middle of summer in the American Southeast, so hot and muggy. Now to skip forward a bit, there was no air conditioning at the family home, the motel, the church, or the reception hall. So everyone was sweating in their very nice clothes the whole time. I'll start by our motel. Some of the parents were going to have their own rooms, and the kids and 2 older kids were going to be in their own room. The first thing that happens is that the kids get locked in the room. A previous tenant had bashed in the doorknob, so they couldn't open the door once it closed behind them. We tried picking up the phone to call the front desk, but the phone's cord and jack had been ripped out of the wall. Some of the younger kids were freaking out because of all the palmetto bugs flying around the room. Motel staff ended up breaking the window because the window was painted shut, and then never offered to move the children into another room until we had asked for it. When we got together at the bride's parents' home, the bride's dad, my uncle, and amusingly my godfather, never got up from his recliner, even though we hadn't seen him in more than 10 years, where he was watching VHS tapes of late 80s WrestleMania. He had an apple box next to the sofa heaping full with empty Miller High Life cans. First, we found out that 2 of the groomsmen couldn't attend the wedding because they were arrested for drug distribution. So one of my older cousins was recruited to replace one of them because he was about the same size, so he could fit in the rented suit. We then found out that 2 of the bridesmaids couldn't attend the wedding because they couldn't get the day off of work from Kmart. So since we were already down 1 groomsman, we only needed 1 replacement bridesmaid. The trouble was, nobody would fit the rented dress. So one of my cousins was recruited to stand with the bridesmaids, with the dress just draped over her shoulder. We get to the actual ceremony. Turns out nobody bought a unity candle to light during the ceremony. So the minister sent his wife to Kmart to pick up a $1 plain white candle. The ceremony started before she got back and paused for a very long feeling 10-ish minutes until she came back with the candle. The bride's flow bouquet was a very fake-looking potted sunflower. After the ceremony, we went to the reception. There were not going to be any beverages provided until the bride's mom, my aunt, my dad's sister, and this will be important later, used their refrigerator rent money. They didn't own their own fridge to buy a couple of cases of Sprite. At the reception, they asked me to be the DJ. They knew I worked at a record store, so they thought, well, he'd be a good DJ, apparently. The groom, last minute, decided he really wanted a limo for the wedding, so they canceled the DJ they had, rented a limo, more on this later. To take the DJ's place, they put a boombox up on a table in the corner of the hall and gave me all their CDs. My heart sank when I looked through their CDs, all country or rap, so I started playing music from the artists that I knew, and everything skipped. The CDs were stacked without cases. People just slid them back and forth across each other when looking through them. Apparently, they also had a party the night before, and when they got thrown around. Bottom line is, the only two CDs that didn't skip were a LeAnn Rimes CD and a Dr. Dolittle soundtrack, so I just switched between those two albums. Then the limo arrived, a 70s-looking Cadillac, smoking. After a few minutes of trying to figure out what was going on, they opened the hood and there was a fire in the car. At this point, people are pretty hungry. The bride comes over to thank my parents for the gift and that food was on the way and said something like, "And there was enough money left over that I could get these beautiful acrylic nails." As the wedding gift, my parents gave them $150 to use for food, since there wouldn't have been food otherwise. The food arrives. It's one 9x13 aluminum pan of baked beans and one 9x13 fully cooked, but still partly frozen chicken wings from her friend's catering company. The groom's family rushes the food. They took all of it. There was zero food left for anyone from the side of the family that traveled 1,000+ miles and actually paid for the food. After about 3 hours of country and rap, my aunts and uncles that have traveled in and are all out of German heritage wanted to dance to one polka. So one of my aunts went to their car, and they had actually brought along a tape with the song on it. After getting the go-ahead from the bride, the song is started, and within seconds, the groom's entire side goes, "Oh, heck no!" and leaves. Every single person. So now it's just the wedding party and the bride side of the family at the reception hall. They had to leave the hall clean, so we all started to pitch in and clean it up. Meanwhile, everyone notices the bride's dad sitting alone at the bar, drinking his own booze. My dad has always resented him for marrying his sister and then moving the family so far away to live near the military base that he was discharged from, and then basically giving up on his life, becoming an alcoholic, and let the family live a really low income life, feeding off his disability. Seeing him just sit while the rest of the family cleaned upset my dad, so he walked over to ask him to help the family clean. Nobody heard what they said to each other until we heard a crash of a bar stool hitting the floor. We looked over, and my dad's holding him up off the ground by the back of his suit jacket, like holding a puppy by the scruff of its neck. My dad was a bigger guy, worked in a factory for 30 years, an EMT, fireman, grew up a farmer, played high school football, etc., but was a teddy bear in terms of temperament. My uncle/godfather was maybe 120 pounds, soaking wet, so my dad put him down, pushed the broom up to his chest until he grabbed it and walked away. My uncle started sweeping, to everyone's shock, having never seen him work a day in his life. After we cleared out and locked up the reception hall, my family went to a KFC for dinner since we hadn't had anything to eat all day, even after technically paying for lunch. We originally tried Denny's, but there was a sign on the door that they were closed so that the staff could have dinner. When we got back to the motel, there was a message waiting for my dad, asking if he'd rather have a butchered snake. One of my aunt's uncle's cousins who traveled and brought their little dog. During the ceremony, it was left behind at the bride's parents' house, but somehow managed to open the rear sliding door and went outside. The back of the property had a narrow waterway running behind it. A large snake had killed and was trying to swallow a small dog. Someone killed the snake by bashing its head, and they called my dad, the avid hunter and former farmer who did have to slaughter the occasional animal, to try to get the dog out of the snake so it could be buried. He said no. The next day was gift opening at the bride's parents' home. As they started opening gifts, many of them personalized, they noticed a pattern. Their last name was misspelled on almost every item. It turns out that the friend who offered to print their wedding invitations with their color dot matrix printer as their gift spelled the groom's last name wrong, and they didn't want to upset the friend and ask her to reprint. So everyone who used the invitation as the guide for how to spell the personalized gift had it spelled wrong. In the end, the groom also got arrested and sent to prison for his connection to the same incidents that led to the two groomsmen's drug distribution issues, and the marriage was annulled. But the bride kept his last name. At least it was spelled right. Too long didn't read? Buckle up. Lots of baby daddies, sketchy motel, VHS types of WrestleMania, huge box of empty beer cans, 6 of the recliner, can't get time off from Kmart, drug arrest, wearing a dress over their arm because it didn't fit properly, ceremony delayed due to the Kmart trip, refreshments paid for with refrigerator rent money, Dr. Doolittle, old limo catches fire, not out of baked beans and frozen chicken wings, entire half of the family leaves because they didn't like one single polka song, nearly a fight from brewing decades-long animosity, Denny's closed for dinner because apparently the staff has to eat, snake eats a family pet, misspelled on nearly every gift, and finally more drug arrests and a marriage annulment. How about that? Next story. Oh, I've got one of these. But it was a fake wedding, unknown to the guests ahead of time. Many of the details are things we found out later. So, the wedding. Everything felt very tense, and the groom looked like he might cry standing at the altar. Bride entered in a dress that didn't fit properly. It had a large, long skirt with a hoop, but the dress was too short and the hoop was too big, so it stays up on an angle and bounced around awkwardly as she moved. The ceremony itself seemed quite strained, and having recently been married ourselves, the wife and I noticed that the celebrant didn't say the specific line legally required for a wedding in Australia, and no paperwork was signed, also required in Australia. At the reception, almost all of table 1, which had bride and groom's families, turned out it was the groom's family that left immediately after the reception started. Groom's dad was meant to pay for the bar tab, but did not do so before leaving. Bride and groom avoided each other apart from an incredibly awkward first dance, and they separated weeks later. So, flashing back a bit, bride and groom were quite young, but with bride several years older than groom, they'd been dating for a while, and a lot of people in our circle of friends had been getting married. Bride was very set on marriage, and groom proposed willingly. As time went on, groom was getting cold feet. Now, he didn't want to break up with the bride or even necessarily call off the engagement, but wasn't ready to be married. Bride was not pleased and pressured the groom to continue. Groom's parents were in very poor health at the time, and when groom tried to say he wasn't ready again, bride started to harass his parents about him trying to back out. Groom foolishly agreed to go ahead with the wedding in order to stop this harassment. Bride was still not happy with the groom's attitude and asked the celebrant to come talk to them, hoping he would talk the groom around. Celebrant, being an absolute legend and really just doing his job properly, refused to marry them once he was told that one party was unwilling, offering the compromise that he could officiate a commitment ceremony, which is not legally binding, and bride took him up on this offer, but insisted on not telling anyone and pretending it was a proper wedding. In Australia, some paperwork needs to be filed 30 days in advance, so there was no time to get an alternative celebrant, and there were evidently a lot of deposits which were not refundable so close to this event. Next story. Had a buddy who was engaging in a marriage we all knew was going to fail. The night before at the bachelor party, we're all sitting around after he went to bed wondering why he was marrying her. She was a rude, stuck-up woman who basically bullied him into it, but he's an adult, so we just let him do his thing. We go to the wedding the next day, and there's like 10 people. Our buddy is holding the ring in his shaking hands, and he drops it. When he can't find it, her dad comes up in the middle of the service in his sleeveless t-shirt, a beer in his hands, and sunglasses on, and starts yelling at our buddy to find the effing ring. He is literally on his hands and knees, combing the grass in front of everyone trying to find this thing. Eventually, his fiancée joins in on cussing him out and storms off. Eventually, she came back and explained, "I needed to drink a beer and smoke a cigarette, but I'm fine now." We never found the ring, and he just pretended to put it on her finger. They divorced 6 months later. We came clean about our confusion about the marriage, and he said he didn't know why he asked her either. Next story. I DJ weddings. Nowadays, I have my own company, but years ago, I was hired out by another company. This wedding was from them. The cake topper depicted a bride dragging a groom by the scruff of the neck. The groom and his groomsmen were all in baggy, ill-fitting suits and dirty running shoes. They at least waited until after the ceremony to put on their, also dirty, baseball caps. At one point, there was supposed to be a special dance, but no one could find the groom, so that dance didn't happen. The bridesmaids were all drunk enough that they both loved and hated every song I played and expressed this to me as I dropped each tune. I don't take gigs like that anymore. Next story. At a park. Pickup trucks with igloo coolers opened on the tailgate were the bar. Everything was served in red Solo cups before the wedding, and everyone got drunk. The bride walked down the aisle drinking from a red Solo cup instead of holding a bouquet. It was essentially a tailgate party with a preacher invited. Next story. Reception held in, essentially, a metal pole barn. While the DJ plays the wedding classic hits of "Whose bed have your boots been under?" and "Who's cheatin' who?", the pee-poor air conditioning and insulation causes the guests to figuratively melt. Unfortunately, the wedding cake literally melts, and the top 2 layers topple onto the floor. The cake is rebuilt into a Franken-cake off of bits of the floor by a couple of guests, hoping to save the bride some trauma. Fortunately, only a handful of guests are served this cake before it is replaced with sheet cake. We sat at our school cafeteria-style tables and tried to drink away our misery one cup of Busch Light at a time. But the hand tap on the keg leaked like crazy, requiring a full-body calisthenic workout to squeeze out a cup of foam every few minutes. Next story. I was visiting my cousin's sister. She took me to her friend's wedding, a small ceremony with very few people. Most of them were family members of bride and the groom. The bride's father probably didn't like the groom. They started arguing in the middle of the wedding, then started fighting. They were rolling on the ground and punching each other. The bride was in tears, and half the guests were laughing and cheering, and the other half were standing like idiots, me included. Soon they got exhausted and stopped fighting, and after some time, the wedding continues. Next story. I'm self-conscious. A lot of these weddings sound like my wedding. Took place at my mom's house. The vows took place in the yard, thrift store dress, and I had a button-up shirt. Reception also occurred in the yard. There was a pig roast, a potluck, and a BYOB. Almost everyone got drunk. Wife and I spent our wedding night in a tent so we wouldn't drink and drive. Hey man, you know what? You're gonna have that. Nothing wrong with a little, backyard barbecue style of wedding as long as everyone had a good time. At least it sounds like they're still together. I say that's +1 for you, bucko. Next story. Half Mormon, half not Mormon wedding. The Mormon half was ultra-Mormon. The non-Mormon half was a good amount recovering addicts. The mother got her daughter's attention by just standing in front of whatever she was looking at, including the groom, the photographer, the DJ. It didn't matter. Mom was also pretty high for most of the wedding. 22 people in the bridal party, only 2 girls were the bride's bridesmaids from before she met the Mormons. They kept getting frustrated because the Mormon bridesmaids kept pulling the bride away from them whenever they saw them all together alone. No alcohol served, so the non-Mormon side went to the liquor store across the street and served their own. Cake smash fail, went straight into the bride's hair. Mormon side started to talk crap about the drinkers, so the drinkers tried to pick fights with the Mormons. Wedding ended early. Lots of tears. Such a hot mess wedding. The couple, who were both together, are both dentists. Next story. I had one of my friends from high school get married in a trashy way. His fiancée at the time invited him to lunch at Buffalo Wild Wings, and she had also invited the whole family. They were in on it, and once my friend showed up, he found out it was a surprise wedding, just like you would do a surprise birthday party. The even trashier part is they didn't like the reserved restaurant or anything, so in his wedding photos, standing in front of the bathrooms by the way, you can see complete strangers coming out of the bathrooms. Next story. Gonna have to go with my own here. Everything was cheap and immediate family and friends. Guest list of maybe 30 people max. Small, fun party. My loud, dramatic, trashy cousin was outraged that her and her 7 kids, drugs do bad things, okay, were not invited. So they badgered and badgered my mother, who badgered and badgered me to let them attend until I did. Then, never showed up, just to spite me, I guess. At my reception, people fed me drinks and shots until I was mortal. At midnight, someone convinced me to ditch my own wedding reception to go get pizza. 2 a.m., my husband had to convince me to go home, and I was loud as heck and waking up my neighbors. Spent 2 to 6 a.m. just throwing up. No sexy time. Spent the first day of married life hungover and in the doghouse with the mister. Next story. So far, it would be the one with my friend being forced to marry. We were still so young, and the guy she was with was way older than us. It was just a wedding without much planning, just the families wanting them to be married since they've slept with each other. Next story. Oil town off the Gulf Coast of Texas. Biker wedding for a couple that had been together for decades already. Met up with her that morning to help carry liquor to the venue, which was the local VFW. We met in a parking lot outside some gas station. She's in a tank top, no bra. Her boobs flying all over the place, and she could give a crap. She pops open her trunk and hands me 6 tied containers. Each is full of pre-mixed shots. Okie dokie. Fast forward to the wedding itself. Roll up to the VFW. Bikes everywhere and me in my Honda sedan. I'm in slacks and a button-down. I'm definitely out of place, but I roll with it. Groom is in full patch at the altar/bar, smoking when the bride walks in. She actually did have a dress, but joked about it being the first time she'd worn one in over 20 years. This was a rowdy as heck reception, lots of fighting. Cops got called at least once. Groom was taken away in an ambulance because the best man had laced the drugs and didn't tell anyone. Good times down in Freeport. Next story. Now, I'm late to the party, but here it goes. This took place in my home state of West Virginia. Firstly, it involves my brother and his on-again and off-again girlfriend, Crystal. They dated for about 6 years, and she cheated on him with a large portion of our friend group. One of the guys she cheated on him with was named Mikey. Another was Philip. My brother found out and they broke up. Fast forward a few months later, and Crystal and Mikey are getting married. We're all friends, so we all go to the wedding and reception except for my brother, for obvious reasons. So, as we're all getting plastered, Crystal comes by the table and I remark that I always thought she'd be my sister-in-law someday. She said she thought so too, but my brother didn't intervene at the wedding, which he wasn't at, when the preacher asked if anyone had cause to object. So yeah, she only married Mikey to try and get my brother to do some grand gesture. A bit later though, Philip, drunk, accidentally bumps into a young child, knocking him down. The child's father punches Philip in the face. Philip, confused and drunk, gets into his car and drives off. Crystal starts freaking out and crying. Mikey gets way too drunk and starts throwing up in the bathroom. Mikey's mom starts screaming at a very distraught Crystal to go and take care of him because that's your job now. Some other stuff happened, but I also blacked out. I ran into Crystal a few years later outside of a Walmart. She was very pregnant. She told me her and Mikey got divorced, but that she got remarried, but was most likely going to get a divorce again too. Before I deleted Facebook, I remember her spamming her wall with cheesy memes about true love and commitment. Sometimes I miss West Virginia. In all fairness to my home state, I've attended some very classy weddings as well. This one just happened to be from the more stereotypical Appalachian crowd. Next story. I'm so glad I can share this story again. In my early 20s, a childhood friend's sister was getting married. I was friendly with the family and all the siblings, so I agreed to go. When I got the invitation, it said on the invitation, "No gifts, please just money." This didn't seem like the bride. She would be fine with either. I then get contacted by bride's mother, who tells me to get them a physical gift because the groom's mother is planning on taking any money they get as compensation for planning the wedding. I get to the venue, which is a church, but the wedding is not actually in the main part of the church. It's in the church basement? So bizarre. It looks like it was set up for a high school dance. My friend, whose sister is getting married, tells me that her sister never got her dress altered, so they had to use safety pins. They walk down the aisle to a Metallica song playing on a boombox. The ceremony was quick, thankfully. No alcohol at the wedding. Okay, it is what it is. There was sparkling 99-cent grape juice at each table. I know it was 99 cents because the stickers were left on the bottles. Bride's mother comes over to me and said I wouldn't eat the food. It was actually food that was supposed to be for Meals on Wheels, and some of it was frozen leftovers of food that wasn't used. This was the groom's mother's idea since she was paying for the wedding. I gave the bride and groom my gift. They said thank you and seemed perfectly happy with getting a physical gift. Groom's mother comes over to me and asks me why I didn't get them cash or a check for a gift. That is said right on the invitation. I played dumb, said I must have missed that. She was upset. Lastly, there was a guy there who took a liking to me. He was dressed in a white tank top, backwards hat, and sweatpants. You know, some real proper wedding attire. He told me he just got out of jail for some drugs and that the gangs, Bloods, and Crips all wanted him. I told him that's interesting because he's white, and I thought they didn't usually recruit white guys. He said they just really wanted him, and that he hung out with black people all the time. He then told me that you could cure some AIDS by injecting dish soap. It cleans out the blood. He asked for my phone number. I shockingly declined. So anyways, the marriage only lasted a few years. Groom has full custody of their 2 kids because bride is not capable of taking care of their children, and she had social services called on her multiple times. Next story. I was a wedding DJ for years, and I have seen some things. Guests throwing up, trashy dancing, but the one that takes the cake is the full brawl that broke out at a very nice country club. This was pre-cell phone, so unfortunately I never got any video of this. The bride's mother and the best man did not like each other already, and to make matters worse, at the head table, the bride's brother takes off his tux jacket and shirt during dinner to reveal his wife-beater t-shirt underneath. The best man comes over and reminds him where he is, and the two of them exchange words. There's a little shoving, and the bride's brother is asked to go get some air. Things are fine, and later BB comes back during the dancing, although at this point he's still not dressed. Whatever, people are dancing, they're all having fun. At the end of the night, BB can't find his jacket and starts making some noise about it. He starts calling out BM, thinks he took it. He's drunk, cursing up a storm, and BM is done with him. BM walks up behind BB, taps him on the shoulder, and in the moment BB turns around, BM slugs him. And it begins. Everyone has their beer muscles on at this point and gets in on it. Groomsmen, bridesmaids, the hall manager tries to break it up and gets a stray hand to the face. The bride winds up hitting the deck, going full turtle. She was a larger woman and couldn't get up because of the fit of her dress. It was like watching a tornado that started on one side of the hall and was quickly moving my way. I raced to pack up my equipment ASAP, was getting my gear out to the car just as the police arrived. I didn't stick around to see what happened. I'm quite happy they paid me earlier in the evening. Next story. Just attended a wedding with my significant other, who only knew the bride because they'd met on a dating website before he met me, had only met in person once prior to the wedding, and had remained friends on social media for several years. She said he was one of her best friends. There were very few guests at the wedding, and he and I were the bride's only guests besides her parents, and the rest were the groom's family. We were also one of the only ones to bring a gift, a very nice bottle of bourbon, and my significant other had to keep dodging the question of how they knew each other. The wedding itself was actually pretty cute and intimate, and the bride and groom were very nice people, and I talked to the groom and his friends quite a bit and had a great time. I just couldn't wrap my mind around why my SO and I were even invited. It was weird to me, not from a place of jealousy. I just couldn't understand why the bride didn't have better friends to invite than a Tinder swipe from 8 years ago. Could have been cause for concern, but at least they had a great time. But anyways, guys, that concludes our stories of the most trashiest and weirdest and foulest weddings of all time. I'm not married myself, but I like to know that the bar is just a little bit lower than I have in my head, so it's a little bit of a safety net. Not that there's anything wrong, as long as you guys have fun, you're in love, and everything's okay, don't worry about the outside perspective. That being said, if you have any stories of outrageous weddings and you want to share them down below, I would love to keep on reading them. And as always, thanks for hanging out with me, and we will see you in the next one.